New Testament reading comes from the book of Luke, chapter 18. Then Jesus told them a parable about their need to pray always and not to lose heart. He said, "In a certain city there was a judge who neither feared God nor had respect for people. In that city there was a widow who kept coming to him and saying, 'Grant me justice against my opponent.' For a while he refused, but later he said to himself, 'Though I have no fear of God and no respect for anyone, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will grant her justice, so that she may not wear me out by continually coming.' And the Lord said, 'Listen to what the unjust judge says. Will not God grant justice to his chosen ones, who cry to him day and night? Will he delay long in helping them? I tell you, he will quickly grant justice to them. And yet, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth?'" I was reading an article that was written by a pastor, and she was talking about prayer, how she had become very frustrated with the idea of prayer and really come to a point where she had to almost really question her faith, but definitely her beliefs around the practice of prayer. See, her sister was dying of cancer. She was going with her to her chemo treatments, and she didn't really seem to be getting much better. Although as a pastor, she was fervently praying for her sister to get better, praying that she would be healed, but there really didn't seem to be any progress. But the pastor couldn't just give up. She couldn't just say, "Okay, fine, I don't believe in God anymore." And she couldn't say, "Okay, I don't believe in prayer anymore." She had to somehow try to put the two together and figure it out to justify what this prayer thing really means. I get that. Don't we all? I mean, haven't we all prayed for something that just doesn't seem to come true? Something that we keep asking God, "Please give me this, or do this, or make this happen, or comfort this person, or heal this person, or give me peace." But it doesn't seem to happen. It's frustrating. Because we come across all these verses that say if we annoy the heck out of God, and we pray fervently, that God is going to answer our prayers. But sometimes things just don't seem to change. And we ask why. I can remember when I first felt my call to priesthood, to ministry. And I had this idea that a priest, a pastor had to be perfect. And so I kept saying, "God, make me perfect. Make me righteous. Make me good. Make me all the things that a pastor should be." But then when I would get mad about something, or I'd swear, I'd do something, I'd think, "Oh, I'm not supposed to do that." But it's not just original to us. You find Paul in Romans in chapter 7 saying, "The things that I don't want to do, I keep on doing. The things that I want to do, I can't do." What the heck is up with this? Right? Even Paul himself is wrestling with these things. Praying and praying and praying. "Take this thorn from my side. Change me. Mold me. Use me." But it just doesn't seem to work. It doesn't seem to change. And so we get some insight from this woman that Jesus talks about in this particular city where there's a judge who doesn't give a hoot about anybody. But because she's annoying enough, the judge decides to answer her prayers, or her pleas for justice. So she keeps coming every night and knocking on his door. And he says, "I really don't care about this woman. But because she's so doggone annoying, so she doesn't keep bothering me, I'm going to go ahead and answer her prayer." And we read this and we think, oh, so that's how God is. If we annoy God enough, then God is going to answer our prayers. Well, you notice I put for the sermon title, "Annoying God." That can be read two ways, you know. That either we're annoying God or God is just plain annoying. And sometimes they're both true. And it's okay to say that. Because we can't make sense of why when we're praying so hard and so much that nothing is happening. Maybe we're just not annoying enough. Maybe we're not beating down the door enough. Maybe we're not saying, "Hey, wake up. Come out and talk to me, God. I'm standing here. I'm doing what you told me to." But the point of this parable, of this passage, is the reversal. See, we read it that this is how God is, but actually Jesus is saying this is how God isn't. Right? He's saying, even this judge who doesn't care about anybody, when annoyed enough, gives in and takes care of this woman. But what about God, who does care about us? Wouldn't God answer prayer for the ones that God loves? That is the point of the passage, but it still leaves us hanging. Because is prayer always answered? No. Okay, God, if you love me, why aren't you listening? Why aren't you doing something? And I still can't wrap my mind around it. It still sometimes doesn't make any sense to me. Why am I sitting over there on my knees during the week lighting candles for people and praying, and God just ain't listening? Some of the clues come in the language, right? We read the Bible in English. Obviously, it wasn't written in English. Obviously, these words had a lot different nuances for them back then than they do today for us. For example, the word widow in Hebrew actually means one without a voice. So one without a voice kept coming to this judge, but was not heard many, many, many times. One without a voice who comes before God and says, please answer my prayer, but seems not to be heard because he or she has no voice. When this judge in the parable says, okay, she's bothering me, the bother actually translates to giving him a black eye. So she's bruised and bloodied me by coming here every doggone night and not letting me sleep and telling me to get the heck outside and talk to her and hear her pleas for justice. Okay, fine, I give in. But so much more, the God who loves us would answer our prayer. But here we are still hanging. And so we look to Jacob. Jacob, who wrestled with God. Jacob, the hero. Jacob, the great guy, the founder of Israel. But Jacob wasn't a great guy. He was a conniver. He was a thief. He was a screw-up. That was who Jacob was. Read the story, right? Isaac is dying, and he says, bring me my son Esau, the oldest son, so that I might impart my patriarchal blessing upon him. And then, who comes along with Jacob? Isaac, old and blind. Is that you, my son Esau? Yeah, Dad. It's me. And so he touches him, and he puts some furry stuff on his arm, so he smelled like the fields and felt like the fuzzy guy that he was. Maybe Isaac knew. Maybe he knew he was being fooled. But for whatever reason, he still gave that blessing to Jacob. But then Jacob has to hightail it out of town because he's afraid of his brother Esau. He's afraid he's going to get his butt whooped or worse. Right? Because he stole his brother's blessing. You don't do that. It was bad enough that he stole the bowl of soup or traded it off for, but he stole his blessing. And then he goes out and he takes off into another land. Even though there was a promise to Abraham, there was a promise to Isaac, and eventually a promise to Jacob that land would become theirs, that land would become a great nation, and the people would be more than the stars in the sky. But how was that going to happen when he hightailed it out of there? Because he was afraid of his brother because of what he'd done. So here's Jacob, so many years later, he's got his wives, he's got his riches, he's finally gotten his father-in-law to allow him to marry his wife. He goes through all this stuff, he's quite successful in material terms. And then he gets to the river Jabbok, getting ready to cross back into the promised land, back to the land that had been promised to his ancestors, and he stops. He sends all of his belongings and all of his family out ahead of him, and he says, no, I got to wait here. You guys go on ahead of me. And we ask, why? At first, when I read that, I'm thinking, oh, that chicken. He's sending them over to get slaughtered. He wants to see what Esau's going to do. Because he's thinking Esau is not going to take it very likely that he's coming home. Like, oh, you dirty rat. But that's not what he's doing. Because he sits there and he waits, and God comes to him, and they wrestle, and they fight, and it's muddy, and it's bloody, and it hurts. That's what happens sometimes when we wrestle with God. It's so necessary, but oh so painful. And he keeps on fighting, and he keeps on wrestling. And finally, he says, "Who are you?" "Why do you ask my name?" And God tells him, "You're not in Jacob anymore. It's Israel. But you got to let go of me because the sun's coming up." Why? Why do you care about the sun? "I'm not going to let go of you until you bless me. I will not let go until you bless me." Okay? Israel, be blessed. Because Jacob had to know that the blessing was legitimate. He stole it the first time. He had to come by balance the second time. He had to know that God was really blessing him to go into this new land and to do the things that God had promised him. But he had to make it right with God. He had to make it legitimate. He didn't know where he stood with God, and so he had to wrestle with God, even as painful as it was. But he did it. And when he crossed over, and he sees his brother coming from afar, and he sends some people on ahead and said, "Here, take all these goats and sheep and belongings and offer them to my brother so he doesn't slice me in half." Comes back and said, "What do you say?" He said, "You fool, I'm your brother. What do you think I'm going to do to you? Get over here and give me a hug." And that's what happens, right? The blessing is upon him, and Esau even recognizes it. Although by rights, by tradition, by culture, it was his blessing, but he accepts it because he sees the blessing of God that rests upon Jacob because he was willing to wrestle with God. That's exactly what we need to do. When we keep praying, and God doesn't seem to be answering our prayers, and it feels like a monologue, it feels like we're doing all the talking and God's not listening, there's really a dialogue happening, not from here out to there, but from here into there. Right? The more talking we do to God, the more talking God does to us from inside, and changes us, and transforms us. Sometimes God shows us that thing you're praying for, you don't need that anyway. Sometimes there isn't even such a clear answer. Sometimes God is just changing us. Sometimes God is just helping us to see things differently. And that is what happens when we keep on being anointed. Keep on praying. Don't give up. Don't stop asking. Don't stop praying. Keep doing it because something inside of us is happening that we don't even know until it comes to fruition. At that aha moment, and we take a deep breath and say, something is different. Now maybe I didn't get what I asked for. Something changed. I was molded because I wrestled with God. And that is our lesson. For me, for you, for all of us. Keep wrestling with God. And when it seems like God is not listening, you hold on even tighter. And you wrestle even harder. And you say to God, "I will not let go until you bless me." Because he will be blessed. Amen. If you're able, would you please stand with me?